Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Friday, January 8th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by Las Vegas Cris, who's become quite the contest legend out in Las Vegas. Finished second and fifth in this year's edition of the Circa Sports Million. I'll chat with him about that, talk to him about his contest strategies. Then we'll take a look at the wild card weekend here for the NFL playoffs and get some quick thoughts from him to finish up this week of shows. Over at ATS.io, lots of great stuff going on for you to check out. Previews of the 6 wildcard games are posted over there at the website. Covering the College Football National Championship game on Monday night between Ohio State and Alabama. College basketball, NBA, that's all going on right now. NHL starts 5 days from today, so we'll have some NHL coverage for you over at the website as well. We're keeping up on the latest legal sports betting industry news. We still have all of our sportsbook reviews over there. And make sure you download the ATS app, which you can get from the Google Play Store or from the Apple Store. Full article integration from the website to go along with lots of helpful handicapping tools, some bells and whistles, some stats, some good information for you to check out there in that Against the Spread app. You can go to ATS.io on your mobile device, go to the ATS app page, then click on the button, whether you have an Android device or an iOS device. That'll be the easiest way to find the app, or you can search for it in the respective store, whether that's the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. Finally, one last thing I want to mention here is that we got a lot of great content on ATS Radio, and you can subscribe to the podcasts on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you stream and download your podcast content. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode here of our show. We'll be doing a lot of college basketball, NBA as we go forward, NFL playoffs, looking ahead to things like March Madness. Should be a lot of fun here over the next few months. And Major League Baseball, not that far away either. That's kind of my area of expertise. So we'll have plenty of that coming your way here as well. With that, we bring on today's guest, and that is Mr. Las Vegas Cris at Las Vegas Cris, CRIS on Twitter. Chris, how's it going today, man?
Oh, it's going pretty well. It's a busy day here. Appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you coming on the show. I feel like a lot of your days are very busy, although at least the NFL regular season now finished, so you're just focusing on those playoff games, at least as far as football goes, but you still do all of the sports as well. And to go ahead and give our listeners a little bit of a background here on Chris, it's not just this year's Circa Sports Million that stands out. Winner of the Win NFL Survivor, a contest for the NFL over at the Palms, last man standing over at Stations. And then, of course, what you did here this year in the Circa Sports Million II, finishing second and fifth with your 2 entries, DV8-1 and DV8-2. What is it about these contests, man? I'm not going to have you give away all of your secrets, your trade secrets here, but you do a phenomenal job in these things, man. Congratulations.
Well, I appreciate it. I work painfully hard at it, and it has to. I mean, you have to be able to win first and foremost. I did just a little bit worse last year. I only had 2 entries and finished 20th and 31st out of 1875. You have to, obviously, you've got to pick winners. I've got a very good system for my NFL, metric based, that I've been doing for years. I've had to fix it and then retool it when the rules changed and the scoring elevated, and just always have to do these little tweaks. And I'm fortunate enough to have a long-term winning history of over, I picked NFL winners over 60% over long term. I don't know anybody else that does that, but that's not good enough to win the contest. You're going to have to be in the high 60s to win these contests. So there is some contest strategy that is employed in it. But you have to have the foundation of picking winners first and foremost. But even if you had those winners, if you don't pick the right games and you don't avoid certain games and you don't do certain things, you're not going to do as well as other people. There's just a lot of little nuanced sort of things that you have to consider And it's not simply picking the games. You have to have the games, but there's often times that I'm using picks in the contest that I didn't even wager on. And there's often times I can't even use the games I really want to use in the contest that I really like. So each week is absolutely different. And it's not a matter of playing the stale lines. I'm sure you're going to ask me that. I, if anything, I want to avoid the stale lines, and I don't want to be on the same games as everybody else is on, unless that's just a game that I really, really liked, and I'm limited in the choices. But that's one of the important things to do in these is to try to be unique and try to be different. With the 4 entries over the 2 years, I operated them almost completely independently without matching them very often at all. So trying to do different things and trying to get different results with each of them.
Well, and, I went 47, 37, and 1 this year in the Circa with my entry, ats.io-2. We had 2 entries here from the website. And, I'm happy with 56%. I mean, that's a very good year in the NFL. But as you said, it's one of those things where your minimum threshold is 60% to have a chance at really being in the money, and then certainly much higher than that for being in a high paying position. So you talked about that, first and foremost, you got to pick winners. That's the most important thing in this contest. You have to accumulate points. But as far as contests go, you can apply a lot of different kinds of game theory. You can apply, going against the consensus. You can apply stale lines. I've heard people say, I'll only play half-point numbers because I don't want to push. A push is a lost opportunity for me to try and gain some ground on some other people. So what are, without giving away everything, I certainly wouldn't want you to do that, but what are some of the strategies, some of the philosophies that, you do employ for these contests?
Well, you hit on one right there, is the half point and full point sort of thing. And I was disappointed because there were so many full point lines on week 17. And that was going to make it a little difficult for me to gain. So using half point lines exclusively is going to be more aggressive because you're either going to drop faster or climb faster. So on my second entry, I started off in the crapper down in the 2800s, and I had no choice but I actually thought about going for the booby prize, and I was going to give it one more week. And on that one, what you're supposed to do is chase those half point lines and chase those oddball games, try to get on the other side of what people are going to be on. If you can avoid the consensus plays, if you can figure out what you think the consensus plays are going to be, you don't want to be on those games. So that's the things that I'm kind of looking at. And the best way you can figure out what the consensus games are is listen to a hell of a lot of podcasts, watch the TV show, see what everybody seems to be on. Look at where the line value games are. The vast majority of time, I'm not searching for line value. I'm searching for games and what I can accomplish from it. If you're leading the contest, if you're up at the top, then you're going to be searching for those line move games, and you're searching for those games that are going to put you on the consensus. You want to be on those whole numbers so that you have a chance of getting a half a point instead of a 0. So what you brought up is absolutely true.
So I guess the follow-up question to that then, Chris, again, I mean, you have to pick winners, you have to accumulate points, but how much of this is, worrying about your own games versus worrying about trying to figure out what the rest of the contestants are doing?
You can't overthink it. That's the biggest worry if somebody's going to try to take some advice off of what we're talking about. Is it's not like you're going to spend, an extended amount of time trying to figure out what other people are doing. You just need to develop an awareness of it. I haven't termed it, but you just have to have some sort of a contest awareness to you of what the mob is doing. And honestly, I don't put a lot of time into the picks. I would have friends that consult with me on what games do you like? What do you use in the contest? And I got sick of telling them, I don't know what I'm using in the contest. I don't know what I'm using in the contest until maybe an hour and a half before I have to put the picks in, because I don't want to be predispositioned all week long and either fall in love or in hate with any particular side. I want to be open-minded when I have to put my picks in. I don't want to have them locked in because I don't have enough information, especially during this COVID period. But injuries, any sort of peripheral factors that can affect the games, I don't have enough information to say for sure what games I'm going to be on. So if I have to add or remove from what my predisposition was earlier in the week, well, then that screws with my thinking also, because then I have disappointment that I have to deal with that may affect decision making. So, that's what I can recommend is very helpful to me.
Well, and that was something that really struck me. You actually reached out to me and so that you appreciated the Circa show that I was doing on Fridays. And, one of the things that we got to talking about was how, on Friday afternoon, I record generally around, noon Eastern time or so, and I'll talk about the games I like on the show. And that was one of the things that you and I discussed, over Twitter DM, was that, I'm kind of painting myself into a corner of, I have this set in my mind that I'm going to play, these three sides. Then maybe I'm picking between a few other leans. And what really struck me was how fluid and how dynamic you treated, the NFL market with regards to putting your picks in, to where there were times where you didn't even know, close to the 6 p.m. deadline or whatever it is out there. You didn't even know up until, almost that 11th hour, so to speak, what you were going to take, just based on what information was coming out and what was happening, with the betting markets. So that really struck me that, you had no worries about waiting until, pretty much the deadline just to ensure you had all the information and as complete of a picture as possible.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. I think predisposition really works against you, and you have to try to avoid it. But see, I have a little bit of an advantage because I am a high volume NFL player also. So the vast majority of the weeks, I have 8, 9, 10 games in the wheelhouse that I'm looking to choose. So most of the time, I know on an average week, I have 8 games easily. So I'm looking for the best 5 out of 8 on one, and I'll kind of mishmash them together between the two of them so that I can hit as many of those 8 as possible, depending on that week. So it's a little bit easier for me, and that gives me a little bit of extra, a resource, so to speak, of being able to instantly know what my choices are going to be, what my options are that I'll consider.
Well, that was going to be sort of my follow-up question was, I've talked about this a lot on the show for me personally, that I think picking 5 games for the contest is a challenge. I think that, a lot of times there are maybe 3 sides I like, maybe 2, some weeks 4. I never really go into either recording the show or submitting my picks on Saturday going, man, I love all 5 of these games. It doesn't really happen all that often for me. So for you, where you've got a lot of games in consideration, how much differently do you treat the contest picks as opposed to, your personal betting bankroll for the NFL?
I don't know. I don't understand specifically what I didn't grasp exactly what you meant there.
I guess, like you make 5 picks in the contest. I mean, are those all 5 picks that you would personally bet? Or, do you sort of deviate because the contest with the stale lines is just so much different of a format?
Yeah. I kind of addressed that a little bit in the beginning, where there's often times where I'm using games that I did not bet. So if I make that statement, it's actually, I think it says a little bit about the importance of how you you need to be open-minded with your contest picks. Because if I have 8 games that I bet and I choose to use a game or two that I didn't even bet, that's going to a real extreme of why I think I need to choose something that I didn't even bet. Because what I really want to do is I want to have contest picks that I'm willing to put my money on. I don't want to, if I didn't have the confidence to put money on it, I consider the contest picks more important than money. So I'm trying to win the contest, and I'm not thinking about the prize money I can win in the contest. I'm thinking about the challenge of winning the contest. So if I have to use selections that I didn't even have the confidence to put money on, that I think that says something.
So as far as the Circa Sports Million II specifically, and again, you finished second, tied for second, and then also 5th with the entries that you had in that contest here. You were on VSiN earlier this week with Gil Alexander, and I won't make you rehash the story because I know it's a pretty tough one to tell, but I'll give the listeners a Cliff Notes version that the week that the Saints and Vikings played on Christmas, you wanted to play the Saints, you liked that game, you didn't submit your picks in time, so you weren't able to take the Saints. That same week, we had a Saturday game between San Francisco and Arizona, and you incorrectly put Arizona when you wanted to take San Francisco. And one of the things that you mentioned to Gil was that, you were up against the deadline for putting in your picks. So, with those 2 instances, would you have done things differently? Or do you feel like, again, waiting until the absolute last minute is, something that you think works out more in your favor than it works against you?
I don't think I made it clear enough that I didn't intentionally wait to the deadlines on those games. I in both instances, I had already decided, no, I'm going to leave those. I'm going to leave the Saints off the table. But my one lower entry had a long climb to make, and I decided that, I should use that one because everybody seems to be on the Minnesota side. So I'm bucking the trend. The Saints aren't going to get the heavy play. So I'm going to more than likely, hopefully be on an off play. So when I submitted the picks for that entry, I realized, boy, I really like those picks. And then I said, well, screw it. I'm going to put it in the main one also. And I just didn't do it fast enough. So it was just an accident. And then the next day, I wanted nothing to do with that San Francisco-Arizona game. I mean, it was injury-ridden San Francisco, and everybody loved Arizona, and I had decided I wasn't going to use it, and it just dawned on me. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I started thinking about it, and I just said, I got to do it. So it wasn't that I waited intentionally for the deadline. It was spur of the moment. I wasn't on a hard deadline for either of those two. If I had not submitted for San Francisco, I had another hour or two to get them in. So it wasn't intentional for me to be on those deadlines. And it's pretty stupid to be that close to the deadlines because the app can go out. Anything can go out. Your phone service could go out. Your internet could go out. And what are you going to do? So it wasn't smart.
Now, obviously this year was unique and hopefully we won't have to contend with this next year. But in terms of COVID, just, and looking back at your performance this year, was COVID a negative? Was it a positive? Did it, force you to kind of wait a little bit longer to send picks in? How did you sort of approach that situation? Did it cause you to do anything differently?
It was torturous because, as the season goes on and the expectations are higher and higher, everything becomes, much more important. Keeping up with these injuries and these COVID things, and it was 24/7. It was ridiculous. There's a network of people that I would touch base with, and we would update each other on news, and even that's annoying because then you get everybody sitting there going, "Oh, did you hear about this that you've heard 4 times before you told me?" And it just gets repetitive. And it just seems like every single week there were significant injuries or significant COVID issues that you had to babysit all day, all night, for wagers and for contest considerations. and you like, so the survivor people, they were really screwed, because if they use a game that was canceled, they're out. But at least we would get half credit, in the millions. But I was thinking about it, and I didn't want to be on one of those games because I don't want half credit. I need full credit. So I want half points. I want games that are going to be played, because I'm over 60% winners on games. So I don't want to only get a half a point.
We talked about this a little bit already, but you had 2 entries, and as you said, one of them you had to take maybe a little bit more of an aggressive approach. But in terms of spreading picks around the 2 entries, what's kind of your mindset there? Is it hoping to cover a larger portion of the NFL card because you have more edges in the NFL, it sounds like, on a weekly basis than most people do? Are you just trying to cover a lot of the games? Are you trying to sort of eliminate variance by having several different games across the 2 entries? How do you handle the fact that you've got 2 entries and picks that you're just invariably going to like more than others?
I think my mental outlook on it is that I have a very high likelihood. I just feel confident. I wouldn't say a high likelihood. I just feel confident that I can have winning tickets each week. And I somehow, there's no way to avoid losers. You can't figure out, well, hey, this one's got a higher probability of losing. It's all random. So I look at it this way of saying, well, I'm not going to put the same 5 on, because if I've got the wrong game, then I'm going to lose on both entries. So what I would typically try to do is, put my favorite 3 games on both cards, and then vary the other ones, so that at least I've got a little bit of each, and maybe I strike gold on one, much better than the first one. So that's my thinking on it.
I guess one last thing I'll ask you about, just sort of general NFL handicapping question here is, when we think of all the popular narratives that are out there, that a lot of people think that, sharp NFL bettors just play big underdogs, or they'll always play home underdogs, or something like that. Do you feel like those things still apply? Do you feel like a lot of those old adages are still relevant?
I do not think that they are. That's a good question I haven't even thought of. I don't think they are, and I don't pay a lot of attention to that sort of stuff either, because I think once the public becomes aware of it, or trends are really extreme, they just generally reverse themselves anyway. It's just like the old Monday Night Football home underdogs. They were gold for years, and then they completely flip-flopped. So most things just flip over. I think people in general, they may bet more overs and unders nowadays, but I think people are willing to bet underdogs a lot more than they were 5-10 years ago. I think just from being educated.
One last thing I want to ask you about here with the Circa, and then we'll take a look at Wild Card Weekend and get your thoughts on some of these playoff games. So 1875 in year 1, 3148 in year 2 for the Circa Sports Million. Set us an over-under here, Chris. How many people you think we get for the Circa Sports Million 3, with signups likely starting in maybe a couple months here?
I think, well, first we have to see if they're going to change very much. I'm going to think they aren't going to change much at all in the millions. So I would think it has to climb a fair amount, but a lot of people don't, as you mentioned, don't like to have to pick 5 games, and millions seem to be like the little brother all year long, because the Survivor got all the attention, and everybody was talking about Survivor, so it was a little bit more under the radar. And when you really look at millions, having to pick those 5 games, it's just not easy for people. I think people had the mindset that it's easier just to deal with 1 game per week. I was surprised how many times I heard on different shows people would make the comment, I don't know how those people pick 5 games. And it was just something I was surprised with, because it's easy to pick 5 games, but for a lot of people, it's not. So let's hope we hit that 5,000 mark. I think that would be a really good figure to aim for. I don't think we're going to see anything exponentially significantly more than that.
Something I thought was really interesting about the size of this year's field, I signed up on September 1st with our 2 ATS entries, and at the time I signed up, I think there was, maybe in the low 1900s or something like that, again, on September 1st. And the season started September 9th or September 10th, something like that, I believe. So, over the last week and a half, there were well over 1,000 entries that signed up, thinking that there was probably going to be an overlay in the contest. Then there wasn't. The pandemic, people, reluctant to travel, all of that. I kind of set the over-under at, 4499.5. I think 4,500 is a decent number, but as you and I were talking about before we started recording here too, it kind of depends on whether or not the Super Contest is willing to change its format to kind of compete a little bit better and maybe give people a choice of which one they want to sign up with. So I'm fascinated to see it, and I know obviously you are, as somebody who's had a lot of success in this contest arena.
Yeah, and everybody was convinced that there was going to be a huge overlay because Derek had guaranteed a certain amount of prize money. And for those that don't know what an overlay is, that minimum amount has to be paid. And I guess I don't know what the amount was in that one, but it was somewhere around 2 million in prizes, I guess. But so if, very few people enter, well, that's you're getting much better bang for your buck. So Derek actually started running promotions. He was giving away, I think, some rooms if you bought entries in both, and some other promotions. Everybody was convinced they were never going to have enough people for this. I was convinced. I remember talking to people. Well, I think they'll get up to about 1,800 to 2,000, and even at that time, people were saying there's no way they're going to get 2,000, but people signed up in droves right before the start.
Yeah, again, we'll see what happens, and we'll see, about the quarter prizes and all that. Maybe we'll have you back on, later on in the year here, sort of talking about strategies in terms of quarter prizes, where I know you finished tied for second for the fourth quarter. That's something that I think is a big draw for a lot of people here in the Circa, and something we can talk about down the line a little bit, because I want to talk about the wild card weekend here. And the first point to ask before we get into some of these games specifically, do you, Chris, handicap the playoffs differently than you would the regular season?
I try not to. I had a really good year regular season last year, and the playoffs I did not do well. I don't even think I was 500 in the playoffs last year. So it is concerning because the playoffs are a different animal. I try not to do anything different. But I just have not been quite as successful in the last couple of years playoffs for some reason. And maybe it is because I'm not doing enough differently. I feel like I'm going to do well this weekend, but we'll see about that. So I don't know how to answer your question. I try not to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it seems sometimes in the playoffs, I need to fix it. So maybe it was just an anomaly.
Well, I guess I could maybe point to something and say, this year is different in the sense that there are 6 games in the wild card weekend, but typically there are only 4. And, in a week without buys, you get 16 games to kind of pick off, some of your edges, some of your opportunities. You don't have as much to pick from here in the playoffs. Are the lines just inherently sharper because of that?
Well, I'm only going to play games that fit my metric model. Our biggest advantage as bettors is that we don't have to bet every game, but they have to put a line on every game. So I don't have a problem sitting out games. In fact, I sit out most big games. I'm not going to bet the Ohio State Clemson game. There's just usually lack of value. The bigger the game, the more lack of value there is. So I follow the exact same criteria that I would use during the regular season. But like you said, there's fewer and fewer options. So maybe once or twice I'll kind of say, well, that's close enough to the border. I'm going to go ahead and include it. So that's the most that I'll do is I'll stretch the boundary or shrink the boundary a little bit.
Well, and I guess a sort of a follow-up question to that would be, you do this for a living. So, if you don't find something pregame, live betting is always an option. And maybe that's something that, you'll find yourself doing more in the playoffs as, live betting has improved dramatically over the last several years in terms of, in terms of the interface working, in terms of, more and more people getting into it, kind of shaping the market a little bit more. So even if you don't have anything pregame, I'm sure you're still trying to attack, either some of the derivative markets or just some of the in-game stuff.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because believe it or not, this is the first year I actually did any in-game for NFL, because by the time the game, I don't even want to watch the games, with the referees and all these, all the work that's been going on all week long. I'm just beat to crap. I need a break. But I did do some in-game this year, and I was shocked that the in-game lines were not what I expected them to be. And I didn't realize that they're so algorithm tied. And so I've been having conversations and I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm like, if they're on algorithms, then this in-game can be, crushed, because an algorithm isn't going to be able to factor in dozens of human factors that somebody watching a game can factor in. So I made a mental note that it's somehow I need to get more involved in it and try to take advantage of the algorithm weakness, because it's absolutely there, because the game, it just does not match properly, the flow of the game and the numbers that they're spitting out there. And I can't put my finger quite on it yet, because it's just in the infancy but sometimes you just look at something, something is off and can be exploited.
Yeah, definitely something I'm sure you'll work on here over the off season and, kind of think a little bit more about that. Chris, as far as this weekend goes, we got Buffalo and Indianapolis. Buffalo laying 6.5, total 51. Seattle now down to as low as 3 in some places. Maybe some positive news on Jared Goff's availability. Total 42 for that one. Then Tampa Bay laying 8 at home, or on the road, against the Washington football team. Total down to 44.5. Anything in those 3 Saturday games that has, kind of piqued your betting interest for this week?
I think that it's amazing. All these games are pretty interesting in one way or another. I think there's a storyline behind all 6 games that just makes them all interesting. I don't know whether it's a coincidence or whether it's just general playoff euphoria, but I think the Colts-Bills game is fascinating just because the Bills look like the unstoppable force, and they're doing so well. And Rivers has such a reputation for, his noodle arm and doing something, even though he did really have a great season. But when he follows up, boy, does he look ugly when he does it. I just see all the pressures on Buffalo. And when all the pressure is on a team, especially without the experience, bad things can happen. So it's not going to surprise me in the least to see the Colts win that game, possibly. I think if Buffalo doesn't get out in front, that it only adds to the potential pressure, because Indianapolis has a solid team of veterans. So, things can go south for the Bills pretty fast, but the Bills could just blow the doors off of them also. With the right game plan, if they can take Taylor out of the equation and have noodle arm throwing the whole time, then it could go really ugly for the Colts also. But I lean toward the Colts covering. I think they win outright or they get blown out. I'm not even sure the points come into play.
That is a game that feels very high variance. I think to a degree, Baltimore and Tennessee, feels pretty high variance as well. I mean, is that more of a comfort factor for you, where you think it's kind of a higher variance game, or do you like something that, maybe seems a little bit more predictable, like a Tampa Bay Washington, where I don't think a lot of people are giving Washington a great chance to win for, a lot of different reasons, but that's a game where we've got a low total and a high spread. It feels sort of more predictable in terms of how that game will play out. So I guess in a long-winded way, do you prefer games that appear high variance, or do you prefer games where maybe you have a little bit higher of a confidence level based on what side and total are telling you?
Well, I don't like the long spreads. One of the filters I have is generally not playing games that are more than 7. Uh, I don't know. It's a pet peeve. I just think that you can't handicap backdoor covers, and there's just too many things that can go wrong. Um, but a game like the Rams and the Seahawks, that's got a low total. Seattle, I forget the exact numbers, played so many one-score games. It's not even funny. So that's a type of game where you kind of feel comfortable on that they're going to neither of those teams can blow each other out, and if you can get the points, if you can get more than a field goal, that's where the value is. I was talking to my friend this morning. I said, give me I'll bet those games blindly every time, and you're going to get the money 6 out of 10 times. I'm sure of it. The Tampa Washington, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, Tampa Bay's beaten one team all season long with a winning record. So if I'm not mistaken, they're going to put pressure on Brady, and Brady doesn't do well under pressure. Plus it's going to be past his bedtime. So, who knows what goes on in that game. I don't have a betting interest in it, but I'm interested in it for the storyline because I think people really want to see Brady advance and have some success and see them match up with one of the powerhouses and not go out against a team like Washington, because that just kind of ruins the story.
Taking a look at Sunday's games here, Baltimore's 3.5-point favorite, reduced juice across the market, or a 3 with heavy juice in their game against Tennessee, total 54.5 in that one. New Orleans laying doubles against Chicago, 10 and 47. And then Cleveland and Pittsburgh, obviously a difficult handicap with the Browns missing Kevin Stefanski and a bunch of players to COVID, and still, of course, worrying if there are any more positive tests by this late kickoff here on Sunday. Anything about those 3 games that, you kind of like here for this weekend?
Well, Baltimore and I are on double revenge because Tennessee was, I bet against Tennessee every time last year, and they went on that run. So the metrics did not match the result. And here we are in the exact same boat this year, but I think we're going to get a different result. With Tennessee's defense being as bad as it is, I think it's like 31st or 30th in my rankings. That's just abysmal. Baltimore should absolutely just roll over them. And I know they played each other earlier, and Baltimore went through their slump midseason, but they got banged up. They got decimated with injuries all at once, and they probably, had their COVID issues and didn't know it during one of those games, and that's why they fell flat. But I think Baltimore's peaking at the perfect time, and they should be able to roll over the Titans defense. And I can't see the Titans keeping up with them. But, they just announced today that, one of the key defensive coordinators for the Ravens looks like he's going to Michigan. So hopefully that doesn't affect them. And then the Saints and my metric model, this game isn't even close. I have that this spread's supposed to be 14, and the Bears have been looking pretty good over the last 5 weeks, but they haven't played anybody. They played like they hit 4 out of the 5 worst teams that there are. So take their success with a grain of salt. This is the last chance for Breeze. The front office is going to get pillaged by other teams also. The salary cap's going to go down. This is it. And the greatest thing about this game or this postseason is they're going to be healthy for the first time. They've played 10 quarters the entire year with their full offense together. And I'm just excited to see what they can do. Considering that they've been banged up the entire season and they still rate my number 1 team, I think is just remarkable, and that they're going to get better. I like the Saints to go. I think the Saints can go all the way. I think that they, unless injuries or something goofy happens, I honestly believe that they're the best team in the NFC. And my eyes and my metrics tell me that. And The Steelers, I played them early at 3.5, and that was a gift. I think 6 is a little higher than we would want to get involved in, and it doesn't help that Juju, was sitting there mouthing off, making fun of the Browns right before game time. Again, we saw how well that worked. What was the other game where somebody mouthed off? The Ohio State game where the guys, ranked them number 11. So what happened in that game? So you just don't disrespect other teams. But I still think Pittsburgh should roll on this. There's just too many problems for Cleveland to be able to deal with the coaching deficiencies, them not being there and being able to switch up on the fly.
Chris, it was definitely a pleasure to chat with you here today, man. And, congratulations on your success in the Circa. Congratulations on all of the contest success that you've had. And let the people know, where they can find your work, where you do some things, and, of course, where they can find you on Twitter.
Well, I'm on Twitter at Las Vegas Cris. I try to just have some I don't tweet all that much, so it's not one of those annoying high-volume tweeting accounts, but just tweet out odds and ends, some sports related, some pleasure related, whatever. I do a side project of mine over at Wager Talk. If people are interested in investment advice with betting, but I don't heavily promote that because I do that primarily just for the challenge of it. That industry gets such a bad reputation for people doing it for the wrong reasons. I do it for the opposite reasons. It's not for the money. It's because people say, bettors can't be winners and do that. Only losers do that. So the amazing thing about doing that project is I work twice as hard now than I did a year ago, because if I slack or if I don't work hard for myself, I can live with that. But if you're responsible for somebody else, I don't want to humiliate myself or let somebody down. So that was actually the best thing I've ever done, was get involved in that project, because now I work twice as hard and I'm twice as efficient, and I've had great results. So that was the benefit I got.
Well, once again, make sure you follow Chris on Twitter at Las Vegas Cris. Again, that's CRIS. And like I said, man, congratulations for your finishes here in the Circa. And definitely look forward to chatting with you again after you cash in some more contests next season.
Well, let's hope so. I appreciate the time. It was a good conversation. And if you need anything else, just let me know.
There you go. Once again, make sure you follow Chris on Twitter at Las Vegas Cris, CRIS, and check out the work that he does over at wagertalk.com. Coming up on our Monday edition of ATS Radio, we'll chat with professional bettor and handicapper Kyle Hunter of HunterSportsPicks.com. We'll talk Ohio State, Alabama, final thoughts, some of the prop markets that are available for that game, then also take a look across the nation at some college basketball. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Have a happy, healthy, smart, safe weekend, and I will talk to you again on Monday.